This happened in July, I believe. It was around 1 a.m. and it was still about 80 degrees Fahrenheit outside. And where I live, AC isn't very common. So I was sitting in the living room with all the windows and doors open. I headed out to smoke, and since everything was open, I didn't want the house to smell like smoke, so I walked down the driveway and sat on the curb. There was a man standing on the same side of the street, but a block down, just staring at me. I got really uncomfortable, so I got up and crossed the road. The way my triplex is set up, there's a 3-car driveway, then a few stairs, and they lead up to the front yard, and then my door is on the right. I live somewhere with a lot of homeless people, and they come up the driveway to look in our trash for cans or whatever, and that's fine. They never go past the stairs. So I'm standing on the other side of the road, and I watch this man stand and stare at me. And then he proceeds to walk into my yard, and I start to panic, because I realized I didn't lock any of the doors and the windows are all open. So I start to walk down the street, and I see a man who looks normal, and I stop him. I asked if he could just pretend to know me. In retrospect, this wasn't my brightest decision, but whatever. So me and this man are just standing there, talking, and I'm explaining the situation while we're both smoking a cigarette. I'm a few houses down now, and the man is peeking around the corner in the line of trees next to my place. He peeks around the corner a few more times and eventually walks up to me. I'm completely frightened, and I'm shaking as he asks me for a cigarette, and I hand him one. He asked me why I'm shaking and if I was scared. He walks away, and the other dude stands there for a bit longer with me, and then the scary man starts peeking around another corner, just staring at me again. The dude walks me to my house, and I just shut all the windows and doors and dealt with the heat. I'm grateful for the random dude, but I don't know what would have happened if he wasn't there. Before going into the next story, I do want to ask if you could please leave a like and subscribe. It means a lot and helps this channel grow. Thank you. I moved in with my elderly grandmother a few months ago because I got a new job down the street from her house, and she said she'd be happy to have me stay with her. Some context. I used to come visit my grandmother about 1 weekend a month. About a year ago when I was visiting, one of her neighbors a couple houses down came to talk to us while we were sitting on the front porch. She informed us that the adult son of the man who lived across the street from them was mentally ill and a peeping Tom. Supposedly, he would come stand in the neighbor's yard and just stare into her windows. She got her husband to yell at him, and he kept doing it, so they eventually called the cops. My grandmother remarked that she had seen the cops at this man's house for years, and that it was a single dad who lived there with his adult son who struggled to manage his mental problems. Flash forward to a couple of weeks ago. Now living with my grandmother full-time, I got home after dark a couple of weeks ago, and the front door was cracked open. My grandmother is a bit of a safety freak, so she always has her doors locked. I was nervous but tried to keep hope for the best, thinking my grandmother had forgotten to close the door on the way in with the groceries. I go to her room and she said she was certain the door was locked. I tried not to worry about it since nothing was moved or stolen. The next day when I got home, her car door was cracked open. At this point, I assumed both instances were her, and that she was just being forgetful. However, she's never left either of those things open before. Well, tonight my grandmother and I were going out for dinner, and therefore I'm the one who locked the front door on the way out. She has a doorknob lock and a deadbolt lock above it. I distinctly remember struggling to lock the deadbolt, and they both use the same key. Sometimes you have to shimmy the door to get the deadbolt to lock, but I got sick of trying and just left it unlocked. And I was satisfied with the doorknob being locked. As I walked away from the door, I thought to myself, I hope no one breaks in. Well, we got back from dinner, and I go to unlock the doorknob, and to my surprise, the door wouldn't open because the deadbolt somehow had been locked. It was at that moment I immediately knew someone had been going into the house while we were gone, and locked the deadbolt back when they left. Once again, nothing had been moved or stolen. The creepy part about this person is they're intentionally leaving doors open and locking back locks that were never locked on purpose, just to creep us out. And he was obviously watching us out of his window to see when we left tonight. I feel certain that it's this mentally ill man, and he must have gotten a hold of a key that my grandmother hid under the mat or something. Why would anyone do this? If it was a robber, they would have just taken something. I'm going to get the locks changed as soon as possible and install a Ring doorbell camera. What I'm most nervous about is once I get the locks changed, this guy, or whoever it is, will know that we're onto them and get mad they won't have access to their twisted pastime anymore. We live in a gun-friendly state, although we don't own any, but I'm afraid of what this guy may do in retaliation. The neighbor who had the peeping Tom incident called the cops on him, and she's still alive, so I just hope he leaves us alone and doesn't bother us anymore. In June of this year, I moved out of my parents' apartment, as I finally got a steady job and longed for some sort of freedom. I looked for apartments that were affordable in my city, and found one that's a 2 or 3 minute walk from my parents' apartment. To me, it was perfect. I'd get to live alone, and my parents would still be nearby so I could visit them whenever I wanted to or pop in to have breakfast with them. The apartment itself is great. It's not really much to look at, but for a single male, it's more than enough. My apartment has a long corridor connecting each room together from the sides, with my front door being at the start of the corridor. My bedroom is the second room on the left, and since the walls are pretty thin, you can hear anyone in the apartment complex walking and talking. Last week I came home from the pub after meeting a few friends. It was really late and around 10:15 or 10:30ish. I had the day off, so I took a shower and hopped into bed to watch Netflix. It's probably around midnight when I heard a faint knocking coming from the front door. I stopped the show I was watching and listened for a minute or so. I thought it was my mind playing tricks on me. I continued watching Netflix, and once again, I heard a 2-motion knock on my door. I sat up from my bed and went to the door and looked through the peephole. Sure enough, it was pitch black. I once again shrugged it off and went back to my room. But before I could even sit down properly, I heard it again, but slightly louder. At this point, I thought it was my friends playing a prank on me, so I called my friend and asked him if he was knocking at my door. And if he was, it wasn't amusing. He paused for a second and just said he had to be up at 7:30 and that he was at home. I was talking pretty loud, so whoever was knocking probably heard me, and as soon as I hung up, I heard another knock. At this point, I was pretty pissed off, so I walked to the door, looked through the peephole, and saw nothing. I then unlocked the door and took a peek and closed the door and locked it. Me being angry and a bit intoxicated, I decided to wait and catch whoever was knocking, so I spent a solid 10 minutes silently looking through the peephole before being a bit startled as someone put their hand over the peephole and knocked again. I immediately started unlocking the door and ran out to the apartment hall. I heard someone booking it down the hall and heard him supposedly lean against the wall with his jacket shrugged. So I ran a few steps down before realizing that whoever this is, he was waiting behind the corner to get the jump on me. I hurried back inside and called the cops. They were there within a few minutes and scanned the building and streets and couldn't find anyone. They told me that it could have been some kids pulling a prank and to never run after someone. They kept the patrol car around the entire night and the knocking stopped. Could have been some kids being dumb, but the part that gave me the creeps was the fact that whoever it was ran down the stairs and stopped behind the corner. He didn't keep running. If it were some pranksters, I'd find it more likely that they would have just booked it outside. And as I said, it's been a week and the knocking stopped. It kept me on edge for a few days because I expected to be jumped by someone when walking to my apartment, but so far nothing has come of it. I've let it go and just hope it won't happen again.